The wind howled like a wounded beast across the frozen plains of Willow's Edge, carrying with it shards of ice sharp enough to slice bare skin. Yet even that cold fury paled beside the cruelty. In the hearts of the townspeople as they dragged 20-year-old Clara Beaumont through the snow, her wrists bound, her face bruised, her breaths trembling like fragile threads about to snap. She stumbled, begging them to listen, to understand she had done nothing wrong. But they had already decided that she was a curse, a burden, and an inconvenience after the death of her guardian, old Mrs. Kennelly, the town midwife who had taken her in as a child. And now that the woman was gone, the town wanted someone to blame for their misfortunes. A poor harvest, a frozen river, a series of accidents that had left the settlement shaken, and Clara, with her quiet eyes and strange knack for sensing storms before they came, became the perfect scapegoat. She draws the blizzards. One man spat as they shoved her forward. She brings death, said another. And with every accusation, Clara felt herself sinking deeper into despair, wondering how people she had served, soothed, and helped could so easily turn their backs on her. But before she could plead further, they pushed her over the ridge, down into the snow-choked ravine, the sharp crack of her body hitting the ice echoing like a death knell, and their lanterns vanished into the swirling storm, leaving her alone to die, the bitter cold leeching at her strength until she could no longer lift her fingers, her eyes fluttering shut as the world faded into white. Miles away, in a lonely cabin tucked between the pines, widower Elias Hart, broad-shouldered, silent, and haunted by memories of a wife. He couldn't save, listen to the blizzard, snarl around the roof as he carved a wooden toy for no one in particular, perhaps for the child he once dreamed he might have had, and when a faint sound, like a whimper swallowed by the wind, brushed past his window, he frowned, stiffened, and muttered, "No one should be out in this," before grabbing his coat, lantern, and rope, pushing into the storm with the instinct of a man who had lost too much to allow death a free victory. Trudging through knee-deep snow, he followed the faintest hint of movement until his lantern beam caught the shape of a girl, half buried, her skin pale as moonlit frost, her lips blue, her breath barely detectable, and Elias, acting before thought could catch up, scooped her fragile body into his arms, muttering, "Hold on, girl. Don't quit on me," his heart pounding with the unfamiliar terror of losing another life. He carried her back, slammed the cabin door against the storm's rage, and worked for hours, wrapping her in blankets, rubbing warmth back into her limbs, feeding her warm broth drop by trembling drop, until at last her lashes fluttered and her voice, thin as cracked ice, whispered, "Why, did you save me?" And Elias, surprised at how much that frail voice pierced his chest, simply said, "Because no one deserves to die alone in the snow," though in truth, something about her reminded him of the softness his life had lost. Over the next day, Clara slowly regained strength, though every movement sent pain skittering through her body. And when Elias asked who had done this to her, tears spilled silently as she confessed the town had cast her out as a curse, expecting the blizzard to finish what they started. Elias, usually a man of few words, felt anger heat his veins because he had seen cruelty before, and though he lived apart from Willow's Edge, he knew how fear twisted ordinary folk into monsters. As the storm raged on, Clara helped him tend the fire, their quiet conversations weaving threads of trust between them, her gentle voice filling the hollow places in the cabin, his steady presence offering her a rare sense of safety, and the lonely widower who had vowed never to let anyone close again found himself watching her with a growing protectiveness he didn't understand. Yet even as warmth blossomed between them, danger gathered in the distance, for the townspeople, believing Clara dead, felt emboldened in their self-righteousness. And when whispers began that the widower had taken in a mysterious girl found near death, suspicion curdled quickly into hostility, and the same men who once dragged her across the snow now spoke of finishing what they started. But inside the cabin, unaware of the storm of men preparing to descend, Clara softly said to Elias, "If your viewers are listening, Tell them not to be like the people who tried to destroy me. Tell them kindness can save a life." And Elias, clearing his throat awkwardly, added, "And if they're still here, maybe they should subscribe so they don't miss what happens next." It's about to get rough. The blizzard lingered for 2 more days, giving Clara and Elias time to heal, time to talk, time to form a fragile bond that neither fully understood, yet both felt deeply, as if fate had carried her into his arms with purpose. But on the morning, the storm quieted, and the world settled into a deceptive, white calm. Elias noticed footprints near the outer trail, too many, too deliberate, and sensed at once that trouble stalked them. Clara, still weak but alert, saw the way his jaw clenched and fear coiled inside her because she knew that look meant the past she thought she'd escaped had found her again. And before she could speak, a rough pounding shook the cabin walls as voices snarled outside, demanding Elias open the door and hand the cursed girl over. Elias stood slowly, his broad shoulders casting a protective shadow over Clara as he whispered, "Stay behind me." And though he had lived quietly, avoiding conflict since the death of his wife, something fierce awakened within him, something that would not bend to injustice. When he opened the door, the cold bit at his skin, but the colder stares of the gathered men bit deeper, and their leader Marlowe, Briggs, a spiteful man with a beer-thick belly and a hatred of anything he couldn't understand, pointed accusingly at Clara, shouting, "She's the reason our boys froze last winter. She's the reason the crops rotted. She's a storm witch!" Elias stepped in front of her, his voice low but thunderous. "The only storm here is the one you carry in your rotten hearts." And murmurs rippled through the crowd because Elias Hart was not someone men lightly opposed. He was a former frontier ranger, a man who had fought wolves and winter and grief itself. And though tragedy had pushed him into solitude, the strength in him had never truly died. Briggs puffed up his chest, insisting Clara was dangerous, cursed an omen, but Elias cut him off, demanding evidence, demanding reason, demanding honesty. And the men faltered because fear had ruled them, not truth. Clara, trembling but determined, stepped out from behind Elias to face the town that had condemned her. Her voice small yet steady as she recounted everything she had done for them, mending clothes, tending wounds, helping children, and how they repaid her by throwing her into the blizzard to die. And several townspeople shifted uncomfortably, shame prickling their faces as they remembered the kindness she had shown. But Briggs, unwilling to lose control, raised his rifle and shouted that if Elias didn't step aside, he would shoot. And for a moment time froze as the widower and the furious bully stared each other down, breath steaming in the bitter air. Elias stepped forward, positioning himself squarely between Clara and danger, saying, "You want her, you go through me." And his voice was so calm, so absolute, that even the storm-hardened men of Willow's Edge flinched. Briggs pulled the trigger, but Elias was faster than anyone realized, knocking the rifle aside as the bullet tore into the snow. And with a single sweep of his arm, he threw Briggs into a drift, sending shockwaves through the crowd. The other men hesitated, realizing they had nearly killed an innocent girl based on fear and rumor, not truth. And Clara, voice cracking with emotion, told them how close she came to death, alone in the snow, and how Elias saved her when none of them would. One by one, the villagers lowered their weapons, guilt settling heavily upon them, though Briggs continued to rage, shouting that the girl would bring doom upon them all. But the others had begun to see clearly at last. Clara was no witch. She was a victim of their cowardice. Finally, Mrs. Turner, whose baby Clara once soothed during a fevered night, stepped forward, tears in her eyes, apologizing for her silence when Clara needed her most. And more villagers followed, offering apologies, explanations, excuses that felt paper-thin, yet sincere in their remorse. Elias kept his stance until he was sure no one would touch Clara again. And when the crowd dispersed, leaving only the weight of what had been and what could still be mended, Clara broke down, sobbing into Elias's chest, whispering, "I thought I would die that night, And he held her tightly, murmuring that as long as he breathed, no one would ever harm her again. The townspeople later returned with blankets, food, even supplies to repair the damage done, and many asked forgiveness, which Clara gave because her heart was soft despite everything. And over the following days, the bond between her and Elias blossomed into something warm, something steady, something like love, slow, gentle, transformative. And though they didn't rush to name it, everyone in Willow's Edge saw the way they looked at each other, saw how Elias smiled again after years of grief, how Clara's laughter returned like the first thaw of spring. The town eventually welcomed her back, not as a scapegoat but as a healer, a beacon, the girl who survived a blizzard and softened a widower's heart. And while life slowly settled into peace, Clara sometimes told visitors the story of how she lived because one man refused to let cruelty win. And as she sits by the fire, smiling shyly toward whoever is watching this story now, she says, if you're still listening, don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this, stories of courage, second chances, and unexpected love, they deserve to be heard. And Elias from behind her grunts a warm, amused, yeah, go on and hit that button. We've got more tales coming.